We'll get started. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So,
right now Greg is not here, I don't expect him, Brad, but
Thank you.
there are no minutes of
That's
11/17. So, Chief Spera to discuss the off-budget accounts. You are up, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for coming.
You're very welcome. You guys asked me to come.
All right. Well, Bob, do you want to just
Introduce it?
again introduce the off-budget accounts and go over them, and then if there are any questions of the board, the chief is here to answer.
Well, the off-budget accounts that have been managed by the police are the ones that you have on your list from 250 to 267. And then there's an emergency management one, which is 268. There's also the 500 account, which is the dog fund. And finally, the 751, which is the police outside services. So I guess it's up to you to ask questions, I guess.
which ones of those accounts are grant funds?
There you go, first question. Which ones are grant funds?
Well, let's go down the list here. So, 252 was a partial grant fund,
That's the one with the negative amount?
correct. 257 is part of grant funds. 256 has some revolving grant funds in it. 265, not necessarily grant funds, but civil service organization funds. And I believe that would be it.
I think you have
Oh,
a
there's
few
some-
dollars coming in 258.
258, yes. The last year's grant JAG fund ran through 258. If it's helpful, I can kind of just go through each one and give you like a 15-second blurb, unless you already know
That
that.
would be
I
good.
wasn't at the last
It'd be good to know where they come from, when we get them, and when they're spent, and what they're spent on. And those are kind of where we want to be, so we have some visibility of what's going on.
All right, I'll do my, I'll do the best that I can with that. I did have a conversation with Chairman Stewart this morning, so more than happy to provide kind of a 50,000-foot overview of the accounts and how they've been managed over the past couple of years. But certainly this will be a topic that when the commission designates their police commission liaison to the Board of Finance, which is what a suggestion I made to the chairman this morning that he liked, and he's going to discuss at the next meeting that he's at. I think that'll be something that they can carry through and continue that dialogue. I think that'll be most beneficial for both volunteer boards. Starting with account 250, that's the Old Saybrook Police Fund. This fund was established as a result of the Attorney General's conclusion of his investigation into the Raymond McMurray Fund in 2009. The actual description of this fund exists in the Police Commission bylaws. So in their bylaws, there's a very detailed description of how money is handled. I'll give you a quick brief on that. It says the purpose of the Old Saybrook Police Fund is to provide for a municipal fund where general monetary donations made by private citizens, businesses, and organizations to the Department of Police Services can be deposited and managed. The resources of the Old Saybrook Police Fund shall be used to enhance, promote, and assist the Old Saybrook Department of Police Services, its members, agents, in the delivery of services and programs. The Old Saybrook Police Commission shall have authority over the funds in the Old Saybrook Police Fund. Monies intended for the fund shall be deposited with the treasurer of the town of Old Saybrook. All withdrawals from the fund shall be done in a manner consistent with town procedures established by the treasurer of the town of Old Saybrook and with approval of the Old Saybrook Police Commission. The fund shall be included with the town's annual independent audit of all municipal accounts. The Police Commission may authorize the expenditure of funds by the Chief of Police within specific guidelines without prior approval of the Commission. All such expenditures must be reported to the Commission at its next regular meeting. The police commission shall direct the chief of police to report on any deposits, expenditures, and the balance of the fund at all regular police commission meetings.
So that fund would exist, that will exist indefinitely.
Yes, as a result of the Attorney General's conclusion.
I thought they were gonna just defund that whole thing and spend all the money. Wasn't there, it's down to 320 right now.
No, that's a different fund. So,
Okay.
I'm sorry, Bob, did you want to answer that?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you're thinking of the one that used to be the MAC
I
fund?
gave you
Yeah.
everything
That's where the
right in
money is
front of
being
you.
spent on the
Yes.
Little League field?
Yeah,
Right.
That's down here as 880,
okay.
and that's listed as the treasurer's fund.
So this account is in lieu of the MAC fund.
Correct.
Correct.
And we used to Raymond Murray, I got too confused.
All right?
So where does the money for that comes from donations?
Private, so if someone makes a general donation to the police department, we receive a check that's not earmarked for one of the other designated accounts that I'll explain in a few minutes. If it's a general donation, it has to be deposited into the Old Saybrook Police Fund, which is account 250, and reported to the commission.
That's just anybody, anytime can donate to that fund?
Yes.
All right. Any other questions on 250? All right?
Want me to move on to?
Yeah, if you can.
Are the people that donate that fund, their names noted someplace that they donated? Is that something, or is that on in there? You don't know who donated, or is it, I wrote a check, so if I write a check and I put it into that fund, is it noted that I wrote the check for that fund?
Well, your check is deposited. We maintain that on a ledger.
Yeah, but is it noted that I gave that check?
Unless someone is looking for some public notoriety, we don't disclose their names, no.
Okay. Does the police department know the names?
We receive the check and deposit, but the general population of the police department does not know their names, no.
Okay. All right, that's all I wanted to know.
Yeah. Oftentimes, the donations that we see in the other accounts that we'll talk about are made anonymously. People don't want recognition.
Yeah.
Okay. 251?
251 is entitled the Police Insurance Exchange Account. And Bob, if I misspeak on the names of the accounts, I think you've talked to the Board of Finance about, what was it, 2010, where exchange accounts became funds at the request of the auditors, so they know that background, I don't.
They probably don't remember that background. Remember when we used to have exchange
I think
accounts?
most of us weren't here.
Yeah, right.
In 2010?
That's what I meant. No.
Some of us were.
In the,
Speak for yourself.
You weren't?
5 years ago, a lot of these were what we called exchange accounts in the 100 fund. And what the auditors asked us to do was move those out of the general fund and make them non-budget accounts. That's what he's talking about. This one in particular, the insurance exchange, is one of those that had been in the 100 fund as an exchange account. In other words, a liability account.
And that, the purpose of that is what?
So again, this account was established prior to 2009. And when I say that, it means I don't know when it was established. It was prior to my tenure as police chief, but I know it's been in existence for a while. And this was to serve as the account that would receive and expend insurance payments for vehicle repairs. So a police vehicle gets into an accident or is damaged in the performance of a police officer's duties. We submit a claim to our insurance company. The insurance company writes the town a check for the damage for that car. That goes into this account. We send the vehicle out for repair. We get a bill for the repair. The expense is paid out of this account.
So that should be in and out, so why is there $2,000 in there now? Is there something else being done that we didn't pay for?
We have one vehicle that still needs to be repaired that has
Okay.
not been taken offline yet to be repaired. And there was a time where, I'd say 3 or 4 years ago, there was a recall on the paint on the police cars, and the town received money to have some of the cars repainted. Some of those cars, if you remember, way back when, some of our cars were in excess of 100,000 miles. We chose not to spend money, because it wasn't totally reimbursed, to paint those cars. So those funds that were received as part of that recall went into this account to offset deductibles that we would have to meet if there was ever a claim of insurance on a vehicle.
Perfect, okay.
So the Emergency Services Unit, which is the only account that shows in the negative, this was established prior to 2009, and it was to serve as the account to manage receivables and expenditures concerning the Emergency Services Unit project, which has been complete since 2010. So the overages in that account are either due to a miscoding of expenditures that were found following the end of a fiscal year, so we couldn't go back and reconcile that, or expenses that were not eligible for reimbursement under the various fiscal sources that funded that account, yet the funds are directed to be taken from this account. The treasurer and I have spoken about this account probably almost as much as the dog fund, which we'll get to in a few minutes, to try to figure out how we can reconcile this. There are no additional monies coming in for this project. It's been completed since 2010. Again, these were expenses that were directed to be taken from this account by the town administration at that time. So that balance has remained dormant, I believe, since 2010.
Did somebody not get paid? Is that what the issue is? It's a negative amount. You owe that amount.
It's a negative amount. Well, I don't know if we owe that amount.
We paid out on the account. The account is negative. We paid out
Okay,
on
you
it.
paid out on it, but then you
And
exceeded.
we're not
it.
expecting any more money coming in. It's a negative off-budget account, which we try not to do, obviously. But it was done, obviously, a long time ago, and it's either unable to be reconciled at the point. I don't know that much about this account, but a negative off-budget account is not what you're striving for.
Right.
And we've talked several times how to remedy this. I don't know if you want to.
But in general, the only way to get rid of
Yeah.
a negative account is to put money in it.
Funded. But how did it get to be negative? I don't understand that.
The cost of the vehicle was higher than the money that we had to buy.
So the cost of the project exceeded the funds that came in. However,
Was the project the van? Is that the project we're talking about? The
correct.
big van?
Right. So what we found, and I think, Bob, when I pulled the record just to kind of take a peek at this today, I think the last time you and I looked at this in depth, it was 2011, when I came to you and said, how are we going to fix this? And we ran all the expenditures, and we found that some items were coded wrong, meaning charged to this account rather than charged to the operating budget, which ended in a surplus in that particular year. But there was no mechanism to go back because that fiscal year had already closed and the accounting process, the auditing process had already taken place. So there was no way to go back and reconcile that, so it sat negative in that account.
Okay. So there was money in the account, and it went to zero because of expenses.
Correct.
And then there were more expenses than there was money in the account, so where did the rest of the money come from? So-
That's more of an accounting question.
Right.
So, just like when we, when you pre-buy gas,
Mhm.
you might run an account into the negative.
Right,
I mean, the money is taken, the money is basically taken from the undesignated fund balance, or
Well, it's taken from our general fund
Taken-
bank account.
taken from the general fund bank account. And, you
being
spend,
charged against this account.
you spend the money, the
Charged,
account
yes,
will go into
exactly.
the negative for a period of time,
Right.
anticipating funds coming in.
Where did the money come from to start the project? Where was the money originally? What project was that originally under?
Grant fund.
So what was the total value of the whole project?
I don't know, it was a while ago.
That's one of the things that just
How does,
drives me a little nuts.
How does something like this happen without Board of Finance or and Board of Selectmen approval? Where's the checks and balances here?
Well, it was probably approved by
It was by the current first selectman.
the,
Not the current first selectman, the first selectman that was current at that time, sorry about that.
and maybe anticipating that it would be balanced out at the end of the year.
Correct.
Yeah, we didn't
And-
enter it intending for it to end up negative.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Right. Okay.
The question is,
And there
does
have
that
been
negative
other-
have to be fixed?
Another tough question.
I didn't hear the question.
So,
Does the negative have to be fixed?
yeah, I mean, ultimately, the auditors are gonna look, and if this is here for another 10 years, they're gonna look at this and say, you guys need to balance out that account eventually. I mean, the idea would be to balance it out eventually, and that would come from either surplus funds at the end of a fiscal year, or tonight, you know, hey, we vote to restore monies to that account from the rainy day fund, you know, undesignated fund balance, and put it in.
I would do that if you had somebody that was
I'm
gonna
not,
receive it.
I'm not asking you
Where's
to
it
do
gonna
it,
go?
Eric. I'm not, that wasn't a request. The question was, how do you do it? And that would be the way to do it. No one likes it. No one's saying it's right. It happened 6 years ago, and, you know, it's been sitting there, and we've all looked at it for 6 years, by the way, because we've had this, so.
And I think there's been other, correct me if I'm wrong, there have been other off-budget accounts that have been in the negative that have been reconciled
We do
in the
that
past 6 years.
Yeah,
but
we do
this one
that.
has never been addressed.
periodically.
So although it continues to show up on the sheet, we've addressed some other ones, not police-related ones, but we've never addressed this account.
All right,
Does the same situation exist for all of the negatives we have with the emergency management up here relating to the blizzard,
Yeah.
with the road endings? So again, it's money spent that we're not reimbursed for.
Well, no,
Is that right?
we don't really have any other negatives, do we?
Yeah.
Not in the 2015. Bob, what do we have for negatives?
No, in the 2015 list, all
Oh, I'm
those
looking at the-
negatives
oh, I'm sorry.
went away because of FEMA funds.
mhm.
So the money was spent and then it was reimbursed.
Right.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at it.
Yeah, I know, I did that earlier, John. I had the
That was
wrong,
That's right.
because the request was made for last year's.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, now I have it.
so-
But you're saying there's no other negatives for this year? On the,
There's no other negatives that we foresee to be negative
Oh, okay.
in the, you know, forever, or next year, and the year after, and the year after, and the year after.
We'll get to some other negatives, and in general, there will be because they're reimbursable grants or something
Yeah,
like
right,
that.
but we expect grant to come in, or we have the grant in hand, just haven't been reimbursed yet from the state.
Any other questions on that line item?
I have a question, Carl. If in fact, we're talking about taking the money out of other funds that seem to be accounted for, and is there any reason why, if this is an offline account, that funds from the offline account could rectify this particular negative?
Other
balance?
offline accounts.
Yeah.
Those other offline accounts may already have a purpose,
Right.
and if they already have a purpose, then no.
Right, but I mean, if there's several accounts here that have been established and their balance remains, is pretty much status quo over 3 or 4 or 5 years, at some point, the money
Not
needs to be
necessarily, and
used.
I think you'd have to take that account by account
Okay,
as to make that determination. I don't,
What it looks like is you have an offline account that has money, that took money from an online account to finish it up. It came from one of our,
Yeah,
came
yeah,
from
oh,
one of
yeah.
our online accounts someplace, I don't know when or where.
yeah, probably, yeah. I think the problem is we don't know at the moment.
so we have some good accountants that'll help us with that.
Going back a long ways.
Good.
Um,
Thank you.
254?
Account 254 is the police uniform and awards account. This was established end of 2008, beginning of 2009, and it was to serve as the account to manage donated funds specific to the department's uniform change in 2009 and the department's awards program, which includes a formal ceremony every 2 to 3 years and informal events that warrant recognition. So in the cases of people making donations, some people make donations very specific. This would be the account if they say, we want to make a donation specific to when you honor a police officer or a dispatcher for service to the community, or we want to be make a donation to part of the uniform change or enhancing the uniforms that police officers and dispatchers wear.
I think you and I have discussed it before. I have a problem with people donating for those funds. I think the uniforms come out of the, awards come out of the town budget. I don't think we should be getting awards from anybody, because as good as you are, as nice as you intend to be, that's the wrong place to give the money. You can donate to anybody else in town. The police department is a pretty important department in town. I don't think people should donate to it directly. Even though you're not making it public, somebody knows that money was given to the police department. And there might be some expectation down the line. So if I was a guy that you said, hey, he's kind of questionable, but I want to give you, I like the uniform guy, I think you guys should do uniforms, I'm going to donate $50,000.
So,
What happens then?
two issues there. You get to integrity, you're talking about integrity.
And I'm not holding.
I understand that, I mean, but that is the background of the question, which I'm sure every police department deals with. Secondly, you also have, and I know because there may be a bequest coming, so someone has died and left money in a will also. I don't know if any of that money is from wills or.
One of this is a bequest,
So,
specific
you
to
know,
awards.
But anyway, I don't disagree with, I understand where you're coming from, and it's a funny.
If somebody puts it in their will, I don't have a problem with that, but I
It's a
really have
funny
a problem
place
with
to
any other
donate.
donations.
I agree with you. It's a funny place to donate if you're a resident in the town, but people do it, and
How much of that account is donated for specific uniforms?
So monies that go into this account are either donated for uniforms and or awards.
I know, how much of
People-
it is in uniform?
So when people make a donation to this account, we tell them that their donation can be used for uniforms and or awards.
I'm just kind of curious, because we spent $41,000 on uniforms for you guys a year, almost 42. And we're sitting on $11,000. So why are we funding uniforms to this general, when you have money in that account for uniforms specifically?
So the police officers' collective bargaining agreement stipulates uniform cleaning and uniform allowance money. The monies in the town's operating budget that citizens are taxed on as part of their mill rate are financial liabilities specific to the collective bargaining agreement.
But still, that doesn't really answer why you can't contribute from that to your uniform expense.
Because it's two different things. And also keep in mind, you underfund the liability that exists in the collective bargaining agreement in that uniform item.
Could I ask a general question?
Chief, that's
Oh, I'm sorry.
your perception of it.
No,
You
ma'am,
can go around
it's-
and blame us to underfund you all the time. You had to say this and bring it up. And now I'm gonna say it back. You blame us every single year that we underfund you. However, it's the town that votes for the budget. So you can't blame us for underfunding you when you go over $115,000. That's a management issue.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up, Breck. So in the collective bargaining process, when the town of Old Saybrook enters into a formal agreement with a bargaining unit and guarantees specific things to happen, the budget is put together using a very simplistic mathematical formula. If each person is entitled to X amount of dollars, then that's the amount of money that's needed to fund that fiscal liability.
We fund the salaries 100%. You have
If-
full-time
can I-
officers, $1.9 million, along with all their medical. Did we cut any of that this year? No. 3% raise, change from last year. I don't think we cut that. That's our liability. Am I wrong?
You're not totally correct. So there are other financial liabilities that are dictated in the collective bargaining agreement that comprise the operating budget. Not everything is salaries and benefits. There are other contractual agreements, such as uniform allowance and cleaning, on the topic that we're talking about, that you could use a very simple formula to figure out what the town's fiscal responsibility is.
But we haven't cut your uniforms. So how are we underfunding that? And I don't think we've cut cleaning supplies, so I don't think we've underfunded that.
So when we
So
go
I'm
through the
kinda
budget
confused here.
process, which with all due respect is not tonight and not on the agenda tonight,
But you brought this up.
but when we go through the budget process, we take a look at our known fiscal liabilities, and we all collectively choose what we're funding. So last year, and the year before, and I believe the year before that, there has been conversation about, well, it doesn't look like you expend all the monies that you say you need in our uniform allowance and cleaning account. But all I can do is request the known fiscal liability. So when that known number is not fully funded, and each bargaining unit employee chooses to use their contractual right and utilize those funds that the collective bargaining agreement says should be available to them, and that puts us over in that category, I must fund that. Otherwise, the town is in violation of the collective bargaining agreement that they have with the union.
But what I'm saying is, we have given you what you've asked for with those line items. We
Right,
haven't,
I don't know what else.
so I don't know
to
how we underfund you when we're giving you what you're asking for.
say. Okay. Not here to argue tonight.
Moral of the story is ask for more.
So, I don't wanna not talk about this, but I don't wanna talk about this tonight because we're talking about the off-budget accounts. And I realize this is related to, budget 254, or the line item 254. I understand where it came from, but I think we're getting a little bit off track. So 254 is an account that's set up, if I wanna make a donation specific to uniforms and/or awards, that's where the money would go.
Yes.
And if you wanted to spend money on uniforms and/or awards, that's where the money would come from,
Outside of the contractual agreement, correct?
outside of
Yes.
cleaning and allowance.
If we were enhancing something or.
Got it. Did you have a question, John?
I just have a two-part question, both general. The initial, the process to disperse funds from off-budget line, is that the same as the process on online budgetary items?
Yes.
So what is preventing us from just converting offline to online and forgetting about, having this other discussion? Because that way, everything will be transparent and people shouldn't have the question in their mind all the time about off-budget scenarios. And who has control and who doesn't have control and where is the money going? I mean, that's how I would look at the
Well,
situation.
these are donations, so are you saying we should be counting out donations to fund the budget? I mean,
It's
that-
offline, these are reserve accounts. We have reserve accounts online as well, correct?
We have sinking fund reserve accounts, we do. I don't know if this is a
I
reserve.
wouldn't characterize
Yeah.
this as a reserve
I wouldn't
account.
either.
No, these are just
I'm not an
accounts,
accountant.
these are accounts that are funded by revenue sources other than taxation.
I know,
As simple as
grants,
that.
fees, donations, I understand that.
Okay.
But why can't we put it online? Is there any regulation against that?
But, okay, so but when you put it online, John, you're making it part of basically an operating budget and a mill rate
That's right.
is really what you're doing. I'm not arguing with you, I'm just saying that's essentially what you're doing by this. And as a result of that, making donations kind of part of the
Okay.
math.
I
I don't
if
think
you-
it's so.
I can
I think if
understand.
we tried it, the auditors would stop us.
Yeah, I probably, and by the way,
I
This is-
withdraw the question.
no, it's a fair question, and by the way, it's been asked. So, this is not unique to the police department by any stretch, right, and I know you know that. I mean, this is not a unique scenario. Library, park and rec,
I know.
youth and family, I mean, it's all, people are generous. So, anyway, enough, like Dave said, it's.
Dispatch 255?
Thank you. And, Mr. First Selectman, I appreciate you saying that, just a rough count, there's over 100 of these types of accounts, just for the folks in the audience or will be watching the video at home, just so they know it's not specific to one or two agencies that the Board of Finance is gonna call before them. There are many, many, many accounts like this that have, in our case, been established for decades. That this is nothing new. Emergency dispatch, So again, this account was established prior to 2009, and it's in accordance with Regulation 2824-3 of the State Emergency Telecommunications Regulations. So this is a fund that is actually required to be kept separate from the general fund of the municipality and can only be used for the purposes of enhancing the dispatch function. So unless approved, as they were for the implementation of the new 911 system, which, by the way, we're still waiting to transition to that, funds have to be used in the quarter in which they are received, and quarterly reporting to the state is required under the regulation. And then there's state auditing on top of that. So the state funding is based on a formula that's created by the state legislative body, which has just in the past 3 years changed from fiscal year to fiscal year.
So you get that money from the state?
That's state dollars, correct?
Is it a formula?
So
same
formula based
for-
on, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It's a formula based on population, but the funding per person has changed throughout the year.
So how much do you get per quarter usually?
Around $7,000 a quarter.
No. If they oversee what you're doing, what can you put in front of them to say, okay, I spent this money, and this is why we did it? They must have some rules, right?
Absolutely. So it has to enhance the dispatch function. So the latest expenditure that I'll be letting the commission know when we have a regular meeting is we are sending a full-time dispatcher, he's taking an online class to become a training officer, so he can train our new per diem dispatchers that we're in the process of hiring. And the fees for that course are coming out of this, get reported to the state, and then get reimbursed.
What department in the state oversees that? Just to see if you're.
So that's the Department of Emergency Telecommunications,
Okay.
which sits underneath Public Safety and Security. It's one of their divisions.
So when you get a telephone bill and it says 75 cents for E911, is that designated some of the money, or is that federal money that goes to the feds, or state money that goes to this?
Yes, but not this. So the 911 surcharge is actually a separate account that's overseen by the State 911 Commission. What that is paying for is the enhancement of the statewide 911 system. So when Old Saybrook finally transitions into that, and there's been some transition issues on the state level, rolling out the new 911 system, that surcharge is paying for that rollout statewide.
The takeaway for me is that we're still on the legacy 911 system?
We are.
That's crazy. That is crazy. I mean, you, John, you know, we've been talking about this in the building committee.
We talked about that before.
I can't believe it. I mean, we were supposed to be over on the new 911 system, which they implemented, then they pulled back, and wow, that's amazing. Okay.
They'll probably pull the funds next.
It's amazing. That's
Well, all the
amazing.
equipment's in, they're just having some issues when
That is
Oh,
amazing.
who's they?
the state of Connecticut and AT&T.
Awesome.
That's incredible.
Any questions about the emergency dispatch line item? Driver safety?
So account 256, this was established by the Police Commission and the Board of Selectmen, and at that time endorsed by the Board of Finance. This happened over 10 years ago. And this is when the state created legislation to return some fees related to the guilty pleas on some infractions, which is cited under Connecticut General Statute 51-56 AD. When it was established, it was urged by those three governmental bodies, the Police Commission, Board of Selectmen at that time, and the Board of Finance, that any and all funds received would be used for positive, proactive traffic safety initiatives and related resources. So those of you that were in office when First Selectman Michael Pace was here, if you remember, one of his famous sayings is he wanted to put money before the issue rather than after the issue. And when this came about, that was the methodology that was implied by those three boards, to take monies from guilty pleas and put it into proactive enforcement. We use it for youth bicycle safety clinics. We bought bicycle helmets out of this account before. This also offsets our DUI checkpoints, so the recurring federal and state DOT grant, again, our bicycle safety clinics, and the traffic safety related equipment for those checkpoints or proactive enforcement activities. When the Police Commission created the golf cart registration program in accordance with the state statute that allowed the commission to do that, the commission decided that expenditures and receivables for that program would be done through the driver safety fund. So one started just to receive the monies of those guilty tickets, then became also the fund where we would receive the registration fees for the golf cart program, and that would allow more funds to be used for proactive things. So just as an example, that this past season, we registered a little bit more than, I believe, 450 golf carts. And after expenses, we netted around $7,200 in that account.
What expenses?
Excuse me?
What kind of expenses?
For the golf cart program, the license plates.
Chief, I understand that there is some proactive golf cart activity in the beach areas and stuff where you actually patrol out there and look for people that could be youthful offenders with the golf carts and things. Has that happened in the past?
So we try to take a look at the spectrum of enforcement and decide on what things are more quality of life issues and what things are more serious. So golf cart violations were once a very serious issue in Old Saybrook. The registration program that was adopted by the commission really quelled that problem. We see very few golf cart complaints. However, when people make them, we do respond to them. But generally, if we find an underage driver, rather than taking enforcement action, we bring the youth back to their house and say to the parents, you know, he's driving the golf cart, he should be driving the golf cart, you know, take care of it as a home matter rather than an enforcement issue. There were several instances over this past summer where there was a serious golf cart accident. One person was, received some significant injuries, and there was an arrest that stemmed from that incident. But generally, golf cart use has enhanced the quality of life of people in our pocket neighborhoods and beach communities. And I'm pleased to report that that registration program has really tempered any negativity that comes with that. There's some, but stuff that we can handle on a very
Is that a
low-key
town
level.
database or a state database on those plates?
So that's a town. Our program has actually been used. We were the first one to do a registration program in the entire state, and our program has been used as a model in other towns. But what's unique about Old Saybrook is we have these little individual pocket neighborhoods that are really isolated, whereas other towns have the pocket neighborhoods, but to get to a beach, they have to go onto a state road, which in accordance with the statute, you can't take your golf cart. So we're kind of perfectly set up for the program. Stonington has adopted our program to an extent, and there's several other towns that we've sent all our information to over the years, and I'm not sure whether they've adopted or not. But as far as who has what plate, that's our own local database.
How much money do you put towards your bike program? You say that is fun that you pay for the bike program? Drivers,
You mean the youth bicycle safety clinics?
yeah.
So it depends on the year, it depends on what we're doing. So I believe this last summer we did it through Park and Rec, and I believe the supplies were minimal. If we spent a couple $100, I would be shocked.
And then, so what would you consider positive traffic safety and related issues?
So proactive traffic safety issues are things like DUI roadblocks, seatbelt checks, things to that effect.
But wouldn't that just be a normal day-to-day activity?
No, ma'am. So concentrated motor vehicle enforcement. A certain number of officers in a certain area for a specific period of time, it is not day-to-day activity.
Any other questions on 256? 257, police EMS.
So this account was actually established just several years ago. We received funds from Walmart to create and provide a community hands-only CPR training program. And currently, we teach the program to all middle school students at Safety Day. So we've done this, I think now for the past 4 or 5 years. And each year, 600 some odd students go through the certification program. If we chose to, we can use the money to expand that to municipal employees. So there's been some talk on our safety committee about isolating some time where we can teach our municipal employees how to use the defibrillators that are hanging in all of our municipal buildings and teach them how to do hands-only CPR.
Do they do that every year? Walmart does it every year, or is it just a one-time thing?
Walmart provides community funds actually on a monthly basis, so they pick specific things that they want to fund. So I know that, I don't want to speak for anybody, but I know that the fire marshal has received some funds in the past for that, the fire department has received some funds. So Walmart has been a great community partner in public safety by helping us provide dollars to provide proactive services to our residents.
So they have a fund they give, a certain amount they give every year for, all that? I mean, I'm just curious.
They do, yes.
What's the number?
That I don't know.
Okay.
Police admin, 258.
So the 258 account, I guess the best segue to this, Bob, and you can help me, is when we consolidated a lot of those exchange accounts. There were a number of exchange accounts that were put into the auspice of police admin. So let me kind of tell you about some of the things that are done with this account recently. So pistol permit applications. So it used to be all the fees that we would collect as a department, records request fees, parking ticket fees, all that gets deposited into the general fund. Our pistol permit fees used to go into the general fund because as an applicant, you would have to write several checks. You have to write one check to the FBI, one check to the state, one check to the town. That check to the town would go into the general fund. Check for the FBI went to the FBI, the check for the state went to the state. The state changed that when they changed all their firearm regulations. So what they do now is they require applicants at the local level to write one check to the municipality, and then the state bills the municipality monthly. So the applicant now writes one check to us, it gets deposited into the administrative account, and then when we receive a bill for fingerprinting services, background checks, things like that, as part of that permitting process, funds through a normal check request come out of this account and pay the invoice that's generated by the state. Some other things we do in this, and some of you remember this from budget conversations, several years ago, the hiring process, we negated the expense of the hiring process to the taxpayer by moving that to a fee-based system, an application fee-based system, and moving it off budget. So we, give testing fees. You pay a certain amount of money to take a test. I think we net $21, $22, $23 per applicant. And then we use those application fees to pay for, in a police process, polygraph fees, examination fees, and psychological examination fees. All of that used to be carried in the operating budget. And again, as part of an efficiency, we moved that off budget, which reduced the burden to the taxpayer. This year, as our town treasurer brought up before, the 2015 JAG grant funds were expended. So if you remember, we purchased a new automatic fingerprinting machine for our new facility that came from the JAG grant. So the way the JAG grant works is they give you a certain percentage of the money up front. You expend the entire amount. After you expend the entire amount, you then receive the balance of that, which has been already completed. But we used the administrative account, instead of creating a whole separate exchange account or fund, to do that in. And then there are still some monies that remain in the administrative account from the consolidation. And the best our records can show, about $3,000 specific to firearms purchases, which was held over from a long time ago capital account to purchase new weapons. And there's around $5,000 in funds still related to the loss of consumables during the flood at 225 Main Street. Specific to, based on our checklist, loss of ammunition in the armory when the armory flooded out. So there's still funds in there that eventually will be expended for replacing those consumables.
I noticed that it, just as a snapshot in time, perhaps money in, money out, last year, it looks like that fund was $30,000, this year it is $15,000. So is that because maybe the state hadn't billed you yet, for instance, or something?
So, no, the story there is there was more money from the loss of consumables that we received in insurance dollars from 225 Main Street that we held off in purchasing for a temporary facility. We waited to purchase those consumables for our permanent facility.
If I may, the chief just made a statement there that may have just gone by without you recognizing what it was. Do you remember when we changed the old capital outlay sinking fund to the new municipal reserve fund? Remember we had a whole bunch of little pieces of money
Right.
that we transferred to various non-budget funds?
Right.
That's one of them he was talking about.
So how much money in there is left from the 2015 JAG grant?
None. None. That was complete in and out.
So do you see that ever going to zero?
No, in fact, it can't. Only because fees for
Okay.
the process will come in and we'll be billed, so
Got it.
otherwise we'll run in the negative. I do see us spending that remaining $8,000, the $3,000 for firearm replacement eventually, and $5,000 to finish purchasing consumables that were lost in the flood. That's insurance money that's dedicated in that account. So, to one point, however, and probably a complete unintended oversight. So let's take the pistol permit process. So the town of Old Saybrook used to earn $70 per applicant in that process into the general fund. When the state changed their rules, I went to Bob and said, how am I gonna do this? They're billing us now. We put in that account. What I failed to do, what anyone failed to recognize, quite frankly, we didn't think of it, was that $70 that used to go to the general fund per applicant is now going into the administrative fund. So I think a recommendation could be, and I would love the opportunity to discuss this with our new police commission first, is a recommendation that might be at the end of the fiscal year, we calculate how many pistol permit applications we processed, and that amount times $70 would be withdrawn from this account and deposited into the general fund. I think that it'd be smart to do that on a once-a-year basis. Otherwise, we'd be requiring applicants to write 2 checks. We're making 2 separate deposits. I think it'd be cleaner to do an annual transfer.
Roughly how many permits do you do a year?
So since the beginning of this fiscal year, I think we're at 20, 21 permits. And we generally, so it's run hot and cold. There have been years where we've done, before we changed this, 100 pistol permits. And all that went into the general fund.
Okay.
So there's a recommendation of money going into the general fund to offset the mill rate. If that's what I heard.
It is, but I would like that to come from our commission. I mean, I know
From the
there's new
commission-
people here, but
From the
Commission
commission
should work
and
on
at
it.
the end of a year.
I think that would be the smartest
To
way
give
to
you,
do
yeah,
it.
right,
But
right.
that's up to
Right,
our
right.
financial wizards.
Well, that's no problem mechanically.
Right.
So, 259,
So 259, it's called Police Illness and Injury. This account was established when the police collective bargaining agreement gained language concerning salary continuation during workman's compensation episodes. So if the board's not familiar with that, I'm a police officer, or I'm a municipal employee, in this case a police officer, I get injured. Traditionally what happens is I stop drawing a salary from the town, so the town retains my salary money in the budget, and I begin earning compensation through our insurance carrier. That's calculated at a rate of what I've earned over the past 52 weeks, including all compensation. The police officer successfully bargained to have something called salary continuation, which means for a period of time, I believe it's 8 weeks right now, 8 or 12 weeks in their contract. For that period of time, the town of Old Saybrook continues to pay the employee. They get a check like they normally would get a check. However, there's still workman's compensation money that's available from our insurance carrier. The town is capturing that money, sticking it into this account, and then drawing from that account to backfill the shifts that are vacated by the person on workman's comp. So the only way monies come in is someone's been injured on duty, and the only way monies can go out is to replace the person who is out injured.
So why hasn't that been used? It's the same amount from last year to this year.
So there has not, so based on my description of use, there has not been a guideline that has met that use. Let me give you a hypothetical example, if it would help. If you're a non-patrol employee that does not have to be backfilled when you're not at work, so if you remember back to the budget vote, the people that aren't highlighted in yellow, if you're one of those folks and you're on workman's comp, you get salary continuation and the town receives compensation. But if I don't need to backfill you, there's no need to draw on those funds.
It just hasn't been used over the past year, hasn't been needed.
But wouldn't that account be growing then if you're collecting?
No, ma'am, we only collect when someone's out on a workman's compensated related injury. So once the employee returns to work, we're no longer receiving funds from the insurance company.
I guess I'm just kind of confused because haven't there been several people out on workman's comp?
There have been several people out injured, but not work-related injuries. So if you're out on a non-work-related injury, obviously we don't see money from the insurance carrier, nor does the salary continuation language in the collective bargaining agreement apply.
Gotcha.
On a side note, didn't we renegotiate the salary continuation on workers' comp? in
We
the last-
got the term down,
Way down,
way down, yep, and we're working on that with another bargaining unit.
so. I think to 6 months, I wanna say, from,
That's the other bargaining unit that we're
Okay.
still
yeah.
with.
I have a question. Somebody goes out on a work-related injury. How long does it take for the insurance company to start making payments back to the town?
Less than a week.
Okay.
Count 260?
Account 260 is the law forfeiture account. So this account was established prior to 2009 to receive monies awarded by the court to be used in the detection, investigation, apprehension, and prosecution of persons for the violation of laws pertaining to the illegal manufacture, sale, distribution, or possession of controlled substances. It sounds like I read from a statute. I did. This account is heavily regulated by state statute. In the statute, it actually talks about balances remaining in this account after the conclusion of the fiscal year must maintain in this account. So very narrow parameters on what we can use this account for. The treasurer can speak to this. This account used to be twofold. There used to be a CD that would roll every 6 months, and we would try to earn interest. Town would earn interest on this, and a separate cash account. But over the years, the CD was earning next to nothing, and we decided to, I don't know if you want to speak to that,
No, go ahead.
why we did that, but we decided not to keep the CD and split up the money, that we would consolidate it into just one account.
So how do you spend this money? Like what,
So we can spend this money for equipment that would be related to any of those things that I just talked about.
can you tell me
In that
maybe
description.
how you, an example? Can you give me an example?
So I would say the most recent expenditure that we've had would be, there is a set sum of money that is available to us, that's withdrawn with the approval of the treasurer, to have on hand to be able to purchase narcotics in an undercover type operation,
Oh, right.
which is not something we go into great detail about, as you
Yeah.
probably imagine.
Right.
Other departments have used this to purchase weaponry. So a department that's looking for less than lethal force equipment, this qualifies under the statute. And actually, before you make a significant expenditure, there's a separate division of the state's attorney's office that deals specifically, deals specifically in asset forfeiture, that you would call and say, we're thinking about using the money for X. And they would say yes or no, it fits the statutory definition.
Is this per police commission approval, or is this part of your operations?
So not everything. So for example, the drug buy money does not go through the police commission in a public meeting, but the balances are reported. But any equipment purchase is certainly brought to the commission's attention, absolutely.
So what equipment could you not buy with that money?
Well, it's kind of a broad definition, but you have to kind of look at the depth and breadth of our operations related to that definition. So, a bigger community might buy surveillance vehicles and, things like that. Nothing that I feel as the chief of police we need in our community.
Okay. Explorers, 262.
The Police Explorer program, this account was created, this was another budget efficiency. So this used to be a line item in our operating budget, and we took it off budget, so it was no longer a taxpayer expense. And the Police Explorer program is obviously our youth program that's overseen by the Boy Scouts of America. And funds in this account are derived solely from donations, which are used to outfit and train our Police Explorer posts. Our primary donor of this account is the Old Saybrook Lions Club, and we're proud and privileged to be partners with them in this account. And we currently have 15 Explorers. So their uniforms, their training materials, things to that effect come out of this. No police officer's salary that oversees the program or teaches the kids or takes them to meetings or events comes out of this account. This is specific expense and supplies related to the post. They also collect cans and deposit them, and that money goes into their own account.
Their own, not this account, their own account.
This account, the Explorer program. So
Okay.
if they raise money for the post,
Okay.
it would be deposited through Bob into that account. So nothing that we do in the police department is without a check and balance, is without a reporting mechanism, is outside of a normal town procedure to request funds be distributed.
And if I may add to that, all the grants, the question came up, how do you know you spent all the grant money? The answer to that question is that's part of the audit process. Every grant from the state, we get a complete list. That's turned over to the auditors, and the auditors do just as fine a job of auditing that as they do our general fund. And that's what you get in your second document, when you get your financial statements. That's the single audit document that has to do with all the grants.
DARE fund?
The DARE Fund account 265, this account was created way prior to 2009. In fact, our DARE program has never been an on-budget expense to the taxpayers. The DARE program, since its inception in the mid-'80s, when Detective Stone first led the program, has always been an off-budget account. So funds from this account are expenses related to educational materials, outings, graduation supplies. The main partner, and the partner that's been there from the very beginning and remains our main sponsor to this day, is the Old Saybrook Rotary Club. We also receive funds from the police union and the middle school PTO.
That's still taught in, which grade level is that taught?
So we have a third grade program. And there's actually a kindergarten program. It's more of a visitation into the classroom, some posters and some safety talks. But there's a third grade program where the SRO at the school will interact with the kids, kind of a lighter curriculum. The core program is taught in fifth grade. There is an 8th grade program that we're currently trying to work with the school system to implement. We have the person in the school, so we're trying to work on a hybrid program for that. And there actually is a high school program, but we have not implemented that.
K-9, 266.
So this was another budget efficiency. We moved some of the police canine expenses off budget because we found that many people wanted to donate to the police canine fund. So this was kind of an operating budget relief, if you will. So the account receives donations from private individuals that are used to pay for the needs of our police canines. So sometimes you might see in the news a group raises money to buy a police dog a vest. That recently happened. within the past couple of years. So monies went into this account as a donation and then went out to buy the bullet-resistant stab-proof vest for the dog. Sometimes this assists us in paying for some of the medical care for the canines, some food. So there's an on-budget account that does some of that, and this takes care of the balance. So if a dog needed surgery or something that's outside of the scope of the operating budget than we planned on, then we revert to the off-budget account.
Animal control.
So animal control, I'm gonna lean on our town treasurer a little bit for this, because this is not solely a police department account. So the Board of Finance knows that animal control is handled as an off-budget thing. On our on-budget, there's a subsidy that's approved through the municipal budgeting process. When I took over as chief, I first met with our treasurer and I said, I need to know everything about everything I don't know when it comes to finances, and what are some of your concerns? And one of Bob's top concerns, ironically, was this fund. It was literally going broke the way we were administrating things. So we instituted some operational efficiencies, and instead of having employees that were paid set amount of hours a week to perform a variety of functions, we went to a pay-as-you-need type program. And I know we've talked about this in the past during the budget process, but the way it works is all of our assistant animal control officers are all per diem employees, not even part-time regular employees, and they only work when we need them. So if a week goes by where there's no roaming dogs or there's no dog bites, no one gets paid. There's no withdrawing on payroll. So if there's a dog bite, a police officer responds, does the initial complaint, forwards it to the animal control officer. That officer spends 1 or 2 hours doing whatever they need to do. We compensate them for that. When there's a dog in the pound, they take care of the dog once or twice a day, depending on the age of the dog and the medical needs of the dog in the shelter, and we pay them for that. When there's no dogs in the shelter, we don't pay anybody. So we've been able to build that fund back up to where it needs to be, and in fact, during my tenure, I believe we've even reduced the amount of the subsidy that we put aside. It used to be a lot higher than what it was. But also from this account is where our town clerk buys the dog licenses, and it's also where a percentage of the money from the license fee through the town clerk's office and the town treasurer gets deposited.
And
maybe
the
you can
reason that's an
elaborate.
off-budget account is because it's donations funded.
Well, and some of the licensing.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's totally separate from 500, the dog.
It is, because the 500 account is the account that you subsidize through the general fund.
So the 500 is what I just discussed. The 267 is the donated account.
That's right.
So if I'm a animal control officer and I get called in tomorrow morning, the money would come from the dog fund?
Come from the 500 account.
Yes.
All right.
The subsidy in your budget is just to keep the account balance up to a reasonable value, which can accommodate maintenance of the kennel.
Right. Okay. Any questions on animal control or the dog fund while we're there?
So-
That's it for the police, then there's the emergency management.
If I could just talk to one other account, if you don't mind. So it's the one that Mr. Thorpe and I have actually met on recently, and we're both kind of doing independent work to meet again, which is our outside services account.
Sorry about that.
So Brad, I would ask you to kind of step in here at any time, but, so the outside services account is specific to police officers that are hired by private companies or individuals, as long as the work is authorized by me for outside employment. So this is the road construction companies. When you drive by, you see the cop on the roadway. The taxpayer is not paying for that police officer. We invoice the contractor the exact cost of the police officer, a fee for the vehicle, and an administrative fee. So recently, I've had the opportunity to sit down with Brad and kind of show him how we do that. So we keep all of our records in a QuickBooks program. Last year, it was close to $200,000 that cycled in and out of that. Again, all payment is done through the normal town process. All deposits are done through the normal town process, and it's part of the independent audit. When I was going over some of the figures with Brad, there were some things that I've always wanted to say, and I'm eager to talk to the new commission about this. So we collect a vehicle fee. Right now, we charge $8 an hour for a vehicle. Brad's doing some research to find out if that should be a little bit higher. I've based it on the federal reimbursement rate per hour for a mid-size sedan. I would like to see a process that at the end of the fiscal year, we take a look at how much money we billed out for the car and how much we received, which should be, the same, and take that money and put that aside to offset the cost of our police vehicles when we go to replace them, whether that's a new lease towards a lease payment, whether that's purchasing a car, but we're billing out for vehicle use. It'd be nice to see the town use that money for vehicle use. I also feel strongly that when we build this account up to a certain level, I don't know what that level is, say it's $50,000, that anything above that at the end of the fiscal year come out of this account and be deposited into the general fund. That we create a policy through the police commission that governs how that works. There always needs to be seed money in this account because we're required by the collective bargaining agreement to pay officers within a reasonable time, then their pay period of when they do the work, and we bill out net 30, net 45. Sometimes contractors take a little bit longer than that, but eventually the monies come in. This account has sat dormant, other than the in and out of payment of personnel, since I've had anything to do with it. The town has benefited from this account. The most recent example I can give, if everyone remembers the sidewalk grant we got in front of Staples, the federal grant to put in sidewalks along Route 1. In the grant package, there was never any funding requested or allocated to traffic direction, which was obviously clearly needed.
Or engineering, as I recall. That's a separate issue.
Can't speak on engineering.
We spent like $100,000 on engineering. It was ridiculous.
So the monies used to pay the police officers that did that came out of this account. In theory, came out of the administrative fees that we've charged other contractors and we've built up in this account. So there was a benefit to the town, and there are times where the Public Works Department needs to do construction work and they're taking up roadway and we need to provide direction. Monies for that come out of this account, again, out of the surplus monies that come from the administrative fees. But I think that the account, at the end of the day, after we pay the police officers for the work they've done, after we carve out the money, if this board and the police commission is so inclined, that we bill for and receive for vehicles and set that aside for vehicle use, I believe we're going to be left with a delta each year of monies that can come out of this account and to be deposited into the general fund. At what level, I'd be interested to hear from the police commission and the board of finance of what they thought we would need to maintain as a balance in that account to make sure we're never negative.
So if money comes in and then the officers get paid, and then money comes in and the administrative cost gets paid, then wouldn't the entire balance be for the cars?
No. So there's a 10% administrative fee
Okay.
that's applied to the entire invoice, including the cars. So the car money's separate, the administrative fee is separate. So right now, the administrative fee pays for the billing clerk that works 6 hours a week. If you remember, 2 budget cycles ago, one of the efficiencies was to move that person off budget and be self-funded through the account, through the billing process. So the person who bills is paid for through the billing process. And she works 6 hours a week and gets paid out of that account. But there is, as Brad and I saw, there's money left over clearly after that. One of the questions that Brad had was in 2 parts. One, are we taking out the other benefits out of this account? FICA, Social Security, things to that effect. In our investigation, we found out that we were. The thing that's left lingering that we're both kind of doing research on, and I'm eager to meet it with again, is where the workman's compensation payment for the hours worked for outside services, where that comes from. And quite frankly, I don't know enough about how workman's comp is paid. I found out today it's paid annually, never knew that, thought it was weekly. So that's something that I think we should look into and make sure that if there is some sort of formula that we can identify, that we can attribute to, there's a workman's comp cost for the hours worked on private duty jobs, that certainly should come out of this account.
It's $5.02 an hour. That's what should be added on to the hours that you're billing.
So it's $5.02 an hour?
Right, should be added on to the payroll. If they're making $30, you'd add 5.02%.
Percent. Oh, okay, I was gonna say, 'cause that sounds like a lot of work,
Yeah.
$5 an hour is a lot.
Yeah, it's 5.02%.
So,
So last year, the payroll was 247,000. The town absorbed 12,500 approximately in workman's comp.
right,
This
so,
should come out of this account.
Was the payroll 240, I'm sorry, was the payroll 247 or was it
247
total?
last year.
Was that the total?
Total
amount?
with the cars.
With the car, so we don't have to pay workman's comp on the cars or the administrative
So the
fees?
payroll, I believe, was 217. I don't have,
Okay.
I got the numbers here somewhere.
You took all my paperwork, I don't have it anymore. I gave it all to you. so-
You can make another
Yeah.
set.
so, you guys, the issue is this, so, we get a workers' comp bill every year, we pay it. Then there's an audit, after the fiscal year is over, Kerma comes in and does an audit to say, how many hours did your cops work last year, or your town hall employees, you know, and if it's, okay, they worked, 70,000 hours last year, it looks like, we estimate what the workers' comp bill is gonna be. If we have an event like Sandy, or Hurricane Sandy, or a catastrophic event, and they work a lot more, in the audit, you're gonna see that police officers worked a lot more. And we did get hit for about a $20,000 bill, I wanna say, after that fiscal year. It was
It was
reasonably-
22,000.
What?
22,000.
Yeah, okay, so I'm not too far.
But every year when an audit is done, you can get a credit if the payroll is less.
You can get a
or
credit.
You can get an addition.
Right.
The problem here was that the 502
Right.
was not figured into the,
Right, which if we figure that in, that's great, that's fantastic. But, so it's based on the audit of the prior year. Every year when we pay our workers' comp, we estimate what our workers' comp is gonna be, based on what we anticipate the hours will be for town employees, so.
So I can tell you, in all my tenure with the department, the past 3 years, I have, and those with more tenure than me, have never seen the amount of private duty jobs that we have seen. So if you think about the past couple of years, there was a seawall that was rebuilt, which is an anomaly, which had 2 officers working every day for almost a year and a half. We had a shopping center built, which is not a normal thing, and quite frankly, even though it's a public meeting, it took a really long time to finish the road work for that, much, much longer than what anyone hoped for. So there was more hours spent there, and for the first time ever, 2 independent tree companies were hired at the same time by utility companies to be in town simultaneously to do tree work on our major arteries. I would expect, and it's dropped off drastically now that Max's place is opened and seawall's built and the trees have all been trimmed. I would be shocked unless there's some other catastrophic event or large building project that I'm not
North
aware
Main
of.
Street.
North Main Street, but I think that's gonna be limited,
Yeah, So-
because I think we're gonna do a lot of detouring there.
yeah, right. So, good.
So I'd be shocked to see this level of private duty job billing and income for our officers to continue at this level. I'd be very, very shocked at that. Can't predict it, but I'd be shocked.
Who determines where you need the workers? I mean, I've seen some workers some places, some workers not places.
So we have we take a map of the town, and depending on the time of the year, we use Labor Day, pre-Labor Day and post-Labor Day, on which roads require police officers, depending on what type of work is being done. So if you're working off the road on a major artery, you may still require that. If you're working on the road, on a side road, after Labor Day in a beach area, you're not required to have a police officer.
So what happens if you're in a situation where you've got guys on their days off, you've got your schedule full, do you pull people in and say, sorry, you're not gonna be working, you're having your day off today and you have to work this?
Yes, so sometimes police officers are ordered in to work, both for the town, department-wise, and to fulfill the obligation of the private duty jobs. And one of the reasons is when we make a public safety decision that a police officer needs to be present on this road job, it's not subject to someone's availability. So the need is the need, despite someone's availability to work. So if public safety is needed, if traffic direction is required, then an officer will work. A side note to that, if you don't mind if I finish, a side note to that is, let's imagine you and Brad are both local contractors, and you're both working on a major road that we have deemed a police officer needs to be present to properly protect, ensure the OSHA standards and direct traffic. There's an officer that's available on a Monday when Brad's construction company wants to work. He gets billed for a police officer, just like we talked about. On Tuesday, no one really wants to work. It's a nice day, they want their day off. You're working, and I say to you, you don't need a cop. Hire a private flagger, or just don't even worry about it. Put out signs. Brad can come back to me and say, hey, how come she didn't have to hire a cop, and I did? And if my answer is, well, no one really wanted to work, that's not acceptable. If there's a public safety need, there's a public safety need.
The flip side of that is sometimes we try to schedule these things, so if the town crew is doing work that they can schedule, we will all do collective emails, Larry Bonin, Chief and I, saying, hey, can you get us a cop in 3 weeks, what day? And so we try to schedule. I mean, private contractors sometimes are less able to do that.
And we have a policy in place that they require 48 hours notice, and there's actually a lot, and Brad, you can speak to this because you read it, there's a lot in their collective bargaining agreement that details how this process works, how they're selected for a job, how they're ordered in, their compensation level, for certain types of jobs, certain days of the week. It's a very detailed process. So part of my job is to make sure that we adhere to that collective bargaining agreement to negate the possibility of a grievance.
How come we can't just hire flagmen and straight out?
So we don't hire flagmen. We require private contractors to hire police officers when we feel there's a public safety need.
But you could technically say that about every time and everything.
No, not at all. I think that the roads that we require are clearly justified, and oddly enough, the way the plan came to be was sitting down with our utility partners. So actually, I think you were first selectman when this happened. The tree cutting crew from then CLMP came in, and they were doing a major tree cutting project. I think it was right after Irene. And we set up a town and decided which roads would require law enforcement support and which roads would not. And we've used that as the foundation for every other private construction contractor. So keeping in mind, first of all, one, it's public safety. Two, the town actually generates revenue through this process. Now we have to decide how we can best use that revenue. As I'm suggesting, perhaps a deposit to the general fund annually, and separating out vehicles to negate vehicle fees to negate future vehicle costs.
Seems like the vehicle fee should at least just go straight to the general fund, considering taxpayers have paid for them. Should go straight back to the general fund.
Sure, and that's certainly one opinion. That's why this should be talked about. My opinion is, so if I can prevent the taxpayer from being billed for a future vehicle by using revenues that we've collected by billing for a vehicle, are we helping someone? So we spend close to $90,000 a year now, I think, on our lease. How great would it be if we could, in a budget cycle, be able to tell the taxpayer, you're getting the same stuff, but we're not going to tax you on $90,000 because we've collected it and put that aside through private billing.
Well, on the flip side, if you put it back in the general fund, it's revenue, so that maybe it goes over to the next year and you're not getting taxed anyway.
So that's
That's up to you guys.
That's a coin, two sides of the coin. It is.
I think it's just better transparency.
You can have transparency in an off-budget account, though. And I mean, we can have it, but that's another, again,
No,
that might
I
be
understand.
another discussion.
I mean, there's a sinking fund for fire apparatus, right? You have a sinking fund for public works equipment. You can do the same thing for police vehicles, and that transfer will be
Good.
transparent. But, you know, either way, that's your decision, that's not my decision.
Is it fair to say that all the officers are paid at least time and a half on road work or more?
Yes,
Okay, so you would.
and that's contractual.
So you, right, I understand that, but you would bill them out, time and a half to construction company, minimal.
Correct.
Depending upon if it's Sunday or a holiday and all that kind of stuff.
Correct.
So, rather than have the complexity of many different pay schedules, which one of them I was really shocked about was the fact that their stipend was adjusted in the payroll. I just never saw anything like that or heard of anything like that. I mean, I thought $1,000 or $2,000 stipend was the amount, but it really multiplies based on how much they work. So it's really more costly.
Can you
But-
pause there for a second so I can translate that for everybody else in the room?
Sure.
So police officers receive, through their collective bargaining agreement again, a stipend for longevity and an educational stipend. The federal law, the Fair Labor Standards Act, requires public safety employees in the calculation of their overtime wage to include any stipended payments. So if I'm a police officer that did not attend college and does not yet have 5 years of service, my time and a half rate is just 1.5 times my straight time rate. As everyone knows through the budget process, and I show you the different overtime rates, each officer, as soon as they get tenure, after 5 years is when that stipend starts, and/or an officer that either has an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree, they get stipends. Those stipends have nothing to do with their salary, have nothing to do with their straight time rate, which, as you know, according to the collective bargaining agreement, sometimes they only earn straight time when working extra hours. But when they do work true time and a half, when they work in excess of 40 hours, or for the subject of this conversation, working that private duty job, their time and a half rate is 1.5 times their salary with the addition of their stipend payments.
Right.
Federal law, nothing that we do unique here.
So, could we come up with an estimate of what the average is if you took maybe a 3-month history to see what the average pay is, and perhaps rather than have the complexity of different levels, so that the companies are being billed at the same rate? In other words, a flat fee of, for instance, $56.40 an hour. If it's regular, you know, it is time and a half, but it's the regular basic work. If it's a Saturday, it's $83. If it's a holiday, it's $96, or whatever the numbers are, so that it's fair for all, instead of, because you have an officer with 30 years, that he gets X amount, and then you've got this new officer that's been on the street for 5 years, and he's making less. I just think the bookwork is very complicated, and I also think it's unfair to the contractor. I think it should be a flat fee.
Might be fair to some contractors and unfair to other contractors.
I think,
Yeah, but my point is,
Yeah,
is that it's not their fault that it's.
No,
it's
they're getting a 30-year guy as opposed to
Versus
a
a-
2-year guy.
right.
But
And I think that overall, I think it would be beneficial to the town. It would be a lot less bookkeeping.
so, a couple of points to that. So there are some towns where some police unions, when they work a private duty job, there's a completely different rate schedule. And in those communities, they have standardized billing. In our collective bargaining agreement, we have no language that says that. In fact, we have language to the contrary that says,
I'm not worried about you paying them. What I'm worried about is what is the town collecting and what is the fair price to all the vendors? That's all what I'm talking about.
if I could just finish. So my concern would be twofold. One, if you're a contractor, if the guy costs $20 an hour and I'm billing you $35, I don't think that's fair.
It's none of your business.
Well, I think it is. I think it's transparency, right? So we're government.
No.
We're not necessarily in it to make a huge profit. Secondly, I think that it's going to lead us down the road in the collective bargaining process to see different language come about, which I do not feel is in the best interest of the town of Old Saybrook. I just don't. And I think that we would have to be very careful on what we charged to make sure that we were actually covering our true expense. So because they're currently paid based on their rank and seniority, that's the way the contract is, didn't make it up, inherited all this, it's the way it was when I got hired. If we build out less of a rate, although standard, than when someone was actually earning, we'd be paying out more than we were taking in.
Why don't we do a 3-month analysis?
Leave it up to the police commissioner. He's gotta discuss that with his police commission too, right? I mean, that's,
Well, it's part
Correct.
of the-
I would just, I would hate to be paying out more than we're taking in.
That's all part of the contract. Can't use it.
Okay.
I had one question on the scenario you laid out where there's a construction job and no one wants to work. What do you do then?
So, based on their schedule, officers are either split the shift or are ordered in to work the shift.
So no one wants to work is not an excuse.
Correct.
Okay.
It's never an excuse in public safety that no one wants to work. We have an obligation to the community. Sometimes there's discussion with the contractor, hey, we're having trouble filling this on this day, hey, you know what, I can move it to next week, great.
Okay.
So we try to do all those types of things.
How does that affect your morale of people like, this is my day off and I'm getting yanked in to do this one?
So morale in a 24/7 public safety agency is a unique question. You're happy the day you get a vacation day granted, and the next day when you want one and you're told no, your morale goes down. So it's an ebb and flow. It's also a double-edged sword for the bargaining unit. So right now, they have a claim to this work. So if I came out with a unilateral decision that no longer were police officers required to work any private duty jobs in the town of Old Saybrook, I'm pretty positive the first selectman would be notified of a municipal prohibitive practice and a claim from the bargaining unit that they have a right to that work. So I would be engaging in an activity that would cause us concern. The bargaining unit, while maybe their morale is affected for the moment, certainly, and we've had discussions about this, certainly doesn't mind the inconvenience or one or two of their members because they would never want to give up their right to that work, if that makes sense. So collectively, I think Brad said $117,000 was earned by police officers in non-tax dollars in the last fiscal year. If we said no police officers are needed, or you only need it when you want to work, the bargaining unit could necessarily be throwing away the right to that $117,000.
Then do you run into situations where, you know, officers are taking their vacations more because they're like, look, I'm taxed, I've just worked my 40 hours, 40 whatever it is, plus, you know, this extra overtime stuff that I really didn't want to work, so I'm gonna put in for this, or I'm gonna put in for sick days, and it's not unheard of when
So sick
no other
time
recourse
is,
to.
sure. So sick time is, for lack of a better phrase, policed very well. We do not have a sick time abuse issue in the department, thank God, knock on wood. There have been some cases during my tenure where individual officers have shown a pattern of sick time, and that's been addressed internally because that's at a detriment to the department and obviously the community of use of sick time. As far as taking more frequent vacation, they all get a certain amount of vacation days contractually. So if they want to use them all in September, great. They want to spread them out over 12 months, that's fine too. But either way, they're going to use all of their contractual vacation time. I haven't met an employee yet that says, nah, don't worry about my vacation time.
You haven't met my husband yet.
He's not a police officer.
Are there any other questions on the outside services line item?
The only other thing I want to add is on the cars, I'd like to either see you do a flat fee for the job, X amount of dollars, or you, because you're using brand new cars, and it's excessive wear and tear, we should be getting in the area of $14.40 an hour.
What are you saying, Howard?
We should get an area at $14.40 an hour, not $8.
And just out of curiosity, so I can relay it, how did you come up to 1440?
Because they said cars idling are equal to 25 miles pulling down the road at 57.5 cents a mile.
And that's for an 8-hour period, is that how you based that?
But then that would be based on, per hour, 25 miles times 57.5 cents. So it's $14.40 an hour. So, I mean, what I would suggest you do is study the last 3 months, and if whatever works out, whether it's easier just to bill them $100 for the day or do the $14.40. Of course, if it's a 4-hour shift, you're only going to collect about $52 versus $100. But then if it's an 8-hour shift, they make out. But it's just the other thing I would suggest. I would hope that we would consider down the road is when you get new cars, I would hope you'd keep your best 2 cars and use those for road work exclusively, so that they're probably only worth $1,500 or $2,000, and let them be the road work cars, sitting there with the flashing lights. They're already equipped, they're already lighted, they're ready to go, and that way we would start possibly making money on the cars instead of losing money.
So, 2 things. One, I will take that whenever there's opportunity to get the issue on the agenda and talk about outside job. I'm imagining that's going to come after our budget presentation that's going to happen in December and January. But hopefully we can get to that right after that, and I'll bring that 1440, and maybe we can talk offline so I can just get some data to back that up. I like to back up to why we're doing things. And secondly, your idea of retaining vehicles, older vehicles for this specific use, is great. I just will need everyone to embrace the fact that that would mean that we would be adding 2 vehicles to the fleet that we already own, but the number would go up. So as long as everyone's comfortable with that, I'm fine with that.
But what you're doing is you're saving our new vehicles.
I agree, but I've never been successful in coming in front of any governmental board asking for more cars or adding to the number. So I'm fine with that. If you're there with me, I'll let you open that discussion.
All right. So, emergency management, do you want to talk briefly about that? Line item?
Sure, might as well do it.
I've talked for an hour and a half, but
I noticed.
we certainly can keep going.
Well, it's the last one, I think.
So look, there's a couple different emergency management ones. So if you're looking at 268,
Yes.
268 is funds that have been set aside, and some of this comes from the old accounts that Bob talked about when we had those. What was the name of them, Bob? The rollovers, the old-fashioned rollover at the end of the year, where we put monies aside dedicated to emergency management. Some of this, actually in this account, is going to be expended very shortly to one of the enhancements of our radio system at our 3rd receive site that's having some technical difficulties that we need to do some work on, that I've already discussed with the first selectman. And then other monies in this would be used to stand up a shelter or other items related to emergency management that we would not be receiving reimbursement from the federal government or the state government for. The other account, the 300 account, the Katrina Relief Fund, clearly when we made all the donations, we were off 84 cents in all the checks we wrote. So 84 cents remains there. It's donated funds. So someone other than me needs to decide what to do with the 84 cents. I think it's insulting if we call one of the towns that we gave one of the quote-unquote lighthouse grants to and say, we have 84 cents left, do you want me to send you a check? But that, again, is donated funds, and I don't have a recommendation on what to do with that. That's going to be up to you folks.
Have all those checks been cashed and used now by our?
You would know that. I don't know
The
that.
bank keeps saying that there's still $5,600 outstanding, and so it must be that they haven't cashed all those checks.
I don't know. So, I mean, if there's still a check that's outstanding, we can try to get a hold of that municipality. I remember there was one municipality in Louisiana that one of the checks went to, and it never got delivered because they didn't have a mailbox anymore, even though they gave us the address to send it to.
We should resolve that.
Yeah, so we can certainly do that offline. I just assumed they've been cashed because the balance shows 84 cents.
Well, it's because it's an outstanding check. You
Oh.
always subtract that to get.
So then you have a negative balance there?
What?
If the cash is checked, then we'd have a negative balance there?
No, this is it. All these account balances include the outstanding checks.
Oh, okay.
Any other questions for Chief on any of these accounts? All right, well, thank you very much. I think it was very informative. That's probably something that we'll talk about again
It's a good discussion.
as budget time comes around, but I do appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
Treasurer's report.
Okay, I have given you a report for the current fiscal year through November 30th, which is just under 42% of the year for comparing percentages. If you look at under the expenditures, you'll see that the general government number is still a little higher than the 42%. Again, that's because we have certain early one-time requirements, the budget transfers out of the capital outlay line item, the bond payments and pension funds. So that's why that shows as higher than 42. But in general, if you look at the whole total expenditures, you see that we are actually running a little better than last year in total expenditures. So
Wouldn't you have had them last year, Bob, also, the prepaid items?
yes,
So, if we were 43% last year, we're at 46% this year.
and it's because you've added some things like the preserve bond payment.
Understood?
Okay? And we've made a payment on the pension fund earlier this year than we did last year.
So if I could just quickly comment, last month, at the end of last month, there was a 7% spread between last year to date, this year to date. That has now come in that's come in, now it's 4%. So that's what I anticipate you'll see as we go through the months, is things coming more into line as to percent of the year and what's been spent as a percentage. Just in 1 month, it basically improved by about 2.5, 3 percentage points. So that's just,
The point being is, this does happen every year,
yeah.
and it'll always be that way. Just
But
because-
there are also added expenses this year.
Yes,
to
there were a
preserve,
couple.
etc.
There were a couple. yes.
Right.
Okay, on the revenue side, we continue to do extremely well. The tax collections are running ahead of last year, and if you recall, we finished with a healthy revenue surplus last year. The revenue from the state is low compared to the 42%, but that's also the same thing that happens every year. The primary monies that come from the state come in later in the year. And our local revenues are exceptional. The local revenues and the total revenues continue to be strong, and we're running is almost 1% higher than last year.
Can you break down those local revenues? Highlights?
Highlights.
uh,
I get a report that gives the individual ones, yeah. I don't off the top of my head know which ones are running ahead of last year.
No,
Except-
what would be the top three?
Well, certainly Park and Rec, along with the mini golf, that was exceptional,
Town clerk's office
okay?
is probably a reasonably good-sized revenue.
And our building permits.
Yeah, building permits, you've seen that in the past, Brad, we've broken that out for you, like a large number, 100 and something thousand. You know, if there's gonna be a hit this year, it's gonna be in the state of Connecticut revenues, all right? Everybody reads the paper, you guys know as much as I do about what's going on there. It's not a good situation up there, we've already been cut. Old Saybrook's already been reduced in the amount of revenue we are going to get this year.
By 88,000.
By 88,000 off that number. There could be more. So, just kind of keep that in the back of your mind.
But in general, I think we're doing well.
We've had, just so you know, I mean, we've had a lot of things going on. Right now, we have Heather's here. We have Youth and Family Services displaced. I don't know how many of you know that. There's a little bit of a mold issue in that building. It's very, I was gonna use a word like remediable, but I don't know that. We are going to remediate it. We're trying to see if there's an insurance claim we can make there. We are working on that with Kerma. We'll probably have a better idea. Thursday, Chief is really helping out a lot on that, to be honest with you. It's kind of an area that he's worked on before, so he's taking the bull by the horns there and is leading the charge there. If part of it or all of it is covered, that's fantastic. But we have Youth and Family Services kind of all over the place right now. They were a little bit in Town Hall, they were at the library a little bit. Thank Heather for her patience. The one person who really deserves a heck of a lot of credit is Larry Hayden. He's been going crazy, hooking up phones and computers, and you call Youth and Family Services, you're gonna get them. They're in emergency management right now, some of them. So Larry has really been kind of working overtime and just as a real side note, now that I brought up Larry, and by the way, he just texted me saying he's still monitoring the meeting from home, and to let him know, Larry.
Did he tell you how good it's going or not?
We are now connected to the Nutmeg Network in Town Hall also. So we have greater gigabyte capability. I think that's probably.
Do we know how to access that? It's supposed to be online, right? It's
What?
supposed to be streaming.
Terabyte maybe, how about that?
It was supposed to be streaming. Is there a way to access that right now?
I'm sorry,
Is there a way to access what he's doing right now, or is it just trying it out?
He's working out a plan on this.
Okay.
I think the idea is going to be to install software on a laptop, and Jerry can just log in and it'll activate
nice.
everything.
Okay.
Something like that, or I can do it. I can bring my laptop in from my office and activate it. It's going to be live streamed and archived. So that's the idea. I got off topic a little bit there. So, but the contingency account is just getting everything thrown into it. We'll figure it out later.
Do we know what caused the mold?
Over there, we're working on that. And that is what will be, that is what will determine whether it's a Kerma covered claim or not.
Is it in the basement or?
It's in the basement.
Basement only?
There's black mold in the basement,
Yeah.
And the first one.
and there is some other mold, not black mold, in some of the offices upstairs. Not to a level where it's probably dangerous, but to a level where it is bothering people.
Yeah.
It has to be it has to be
Right.
done.
How much did you say that was gonna be?
I didn't.
Oh, I thought there was an email that.
How much the remediation was gonna be, I didn't.
Oh, okay.
I have some ideas, it's,
Is that Mystic Air Quality?
yes, I had them in.
What's the status of the furnace? Is that still going ahead?
It's scheduled for the end of December, and I think one way or another, we're gonna be remediated by then. So that gas furnace is going in. With regard to a Kerma claim, the chief said to them, hey, if it was part of a furnace problem where the furnace was leaking, which it did, good news is you don't have to replace the furnace. So, anyway, that's one of the accounts that is going to go over. Is over probably right now, but we'll figure that out at the end of the year, like we did last year with the contingency account.
Once that problem's resolved, shouldn't we just fund it?
What's
The mold.
What?
No, the mold problem.
Yeah.
Once it's resolved and there's an amount, shouldn't that come out of our account, general
It
account?
can, but let's say it's covered by our insurance. There's
Well,
no-
they are.
Yeah, but if it's not, I'll bring it to you,
Right.
and I'll let you know how I plan to deal with it and
Right.
what I suggest, and you can go from there.
All right. Any other questions for Bob? All right, Bob, thank you. Selectmen report?
Heather's here. Before we forget, at the last meeting, I brought up what was discussed in early July about adding a certain amount to their budget. I want
Yes.
to say 4,000, and I have the number,
They didn't get it.
4,796, which was put off to this meeting.
Right.
It's a regular meeting. If you guys so choose, you can add to discuss it at some point. I don't want you to forget that. So I'm putting that out there now before I forget to remind you. At the next meeting, let me ask you guys how this sounds, and I've already run it by Dave. You hear me talk about heart and hypertension a lot. Brad talks about it a little bit whenever I talk about it. I'd like to have the lawyer come in from Canaan, Escalera, and McHale. Yeah, I got that right. Joe McQuaid, who handles all our heart and hypertension cases, not to talk about particular cases. But would you guys like to gain some insight into that law and how it works? I think it's important enough a topic to have somebody come down and explain it. Yes?
Yes.
He's scheduled to come down for the 15th right now. I think it's a good topic for you guys to know. You're funding a liability off budget right now. We have money in there. We will continue to put money in there. And I'd like you to hear from him as to what the potential liabilities are, not necessarily in terms of people or dollar amounts, but we can do that at another time in executive session once the framework is set, okay?
Can you send some just general information on it?
I think it'll be educational enough. Heart and hypertension is a law that was passed and repealed, and a lot of the police officers and paid firefighters too, right?
Correct.
Were under the law. But in our town, obviously, police officers, if you had any kind of a hypertension or any kind of a heart issue that was documented at the time, anytime you were working, there was a presumption. This is the best background that you're probably going to get before that meeting, but he'll explain a lot more. There's a presumption that it was job-related, a presumption. So the officer or firefighter doesn't have to prove it. The town has to prove that it isn't job-related.
Gotcha.
And they repealed that law, but officers who were paid, were working before that are grandfathered. And I've expressed a concern to you about firefighter cancer liability, which was discussed in the last general session, which would put in place a presumption that if a firefighter, volunteer or paid, contracts a certain types of cancer, and many cancers, by the way, not just a type, but many different types of cancer, that it's presumed that it was as a result of their occupation or their volunteerism as a firefighter. There are some parameters they're putting in there about you have to have responded to so many fires or incidents or stuff. But so that will resurface at the general legislature this year. And the argument is you're basically putting in place another heart and hypertension law, an unfunded liability to the towns, because it's not workers' comp. If they get cancer, it is on the town. Anyway, I don't want to go into that right now. It's not law yet, but you've heard me talk about it. You will continue to hear me talk about it. So Youth and Family Services Funds, Joe McQuaid's going to come down.
December 15th.
I'm sorry?
December 15th.
Yep, next meeting. There was an article in the Current about the Making Places grant for the old power plant I don't know if any of you guys saw it.
Yep.
Let's see. Leanne is officially on board right now, but we won't make her come up with a report tonight. All right.
It's not there.
Just very quickly, I want to hand out, I tell you that every month I get a municipal labor report from Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, which is an organization we belong to. And this is, just pass that on, I think there's one for you there, Jerry, too. Just to tell you, I just got this today, I get it every month, but I thought I'd print it out for you tonight. Increases fiscal year arbitration awards and negotiated settlements. So you'll see what the numbers are out there for public sector unions. And the reason it goes back to fiscal year 12 is because a lot of these contracts get settled 3 years hence, and they have to go backwards. But moving forward, you see that arbitrated awards about 2.25 for fiscal year 16, 2.38 for 17, and negotiated 2.27 and 2.29. Just so you know, our town hall unions are at 2.25 next year. And that's basically what I'm doing when I go into these negotiations. I just go like this. I said, I'm not gonna be unfair, let's be fair. Here's the number. So, this is just, you guys can take a look at that, but I just wanted to show you, I get this every month and it gives us new reports. Anyway, that's about all I have right now.
The auditors, are they still in?
They're done, right? Auditors
Well,
are
they
closed?
spent their time here, they left a couple of weeks ago. We haven't heard any new requests from them, so I'm guessing that we're going to get our audit completed on schedule.
So do we ever have an opportunity to meet with them?
January.
Yeah,
We're gonna-
generally what happens is they will deliver at the end of December the documents, and then we have them come in January and go over them with you.
Okay. Sounds like a plan.
So before you get your budgets on March 1st, you have 4 meetings. 2 in January, 2 in February. So you're gonna do the auditors 1 meeting, so you'll have business meetings where you can do some things that like we did tonight. And the auditors will be 1.
Could we have the youth and family come in and do
Yep.
that?
Any questions for Carl? Yes.
I have one question, going back to Bob's report,
Yep.
if you don't mind. Actually for Chief Justice, since he's here. Are you gonna be over this year? Just looking at your budget?
Well, I don't know if the overall budget is gonna be over. I'm, anticipating that some of our line items will certainly be over.
Like,
So currently extra personnel, so if you remember, we have like 5 or 7 different personnel-related line items, each with their own specific use. So while we are down 4 police officer positions, the only mechanism I have to backfill those shifts is taking monies out of our quote-unquote extra personnel line item, but at the same time, I'm not expending all the salary money that has been budgeted. So we may see a case, we will see a case at the end of the year where salary will be in the black, but extra personnel will run in the red. There's some conversation on whether we should come to the Board of Finance and say, we need more money in extra personnel because we're running that line item in a deficit. I don't subscribe to that because I think that messes up our actuals from year to year. And my goal, as it always is to try to keep the bottom line of the overall budget in the black.
I suggest you ask for a transfer.
It doesn't, it's intra-department, don't need to transfer. You don't need to transfer at the Board of Finance level, intra-department. Inter-department, yes. I mean, if Larry goes over
So
on sand and salt and he doesn't go over on uniforms,
They don't need our permission.
Correct.
Okay. Is that in the charter?
yes, I mean, it's just the way we govern. I mean, we don't, you know,
It's
it's not,
the numbers that we give to the public for the referendum and the town meetings and things are the department numbers.
if we had to come in for every transfer in town,
Well, I mean, it's
every
just a-
line item, that would be,
I think it's better though to have it run by the selectmen and the Board of Finance, so that they're aware of it.
not every line item. I think you need, that's my opinion, not every line item, in every budget. I think that's extraordinarily laborious for a volunteer board that meets every 2 weeks. That's my,
What about over a certain amount?
we would spend 2 hours every meeting doing
What
that.
about over a certain amount? I mean, I'm not talking about you bought pencils instead of crayons, I'm talking about,
Well, I think
you know,
we
20.
kind of do that anyway. I mean, you're looking at the bottom lines, you're looking at where the departments are. I mean, if one line item is gonna go over,
well, let's just drop that for a subject for a minute then. What about if the department is going to run over? I believe before the end of the fiscal year, the Board of Finance
So,
and the selectmen
and I
should be
believe we-
notified.
I believe we do
We
do
have
that.
that policy.
Yeah.
It's a policy, but you get monthly reports. I mean, and I'm, you know, that, told you last year exactly what was gonna go over. And we did some transfers before the end of the year. We did a transfer in contingency. Yeah, there's some departments we're gonna do that with, and if we eyeball it early enough, I think it's a good practice to do it. Yeah, I agree.
The question is you tell us what's gonna go over, but nothing happens.
What do you
Because
mean?
that's, well, we hear about something going over, we discuss, but there isn't per se a plan of action to stop it, or to negate it a bit, or prevent it.
Well, it depends.
And I guess that's the question of who is responsible then for the overage at that point, where, you know, we, as a board, can't say, stop, can't spend
So-
anymore.
Okay, so
I think this is the $1,000,000 question that we all keep
it
skirting around
is,
every single.
and it's a very difficult question because, so when the Kate maintenance line item goes over for heating and air conditioning, or the contingency line item goes over, because I had a retirement payout and I had mold in the family services building, I don't know how to stop that. I could say, let's shut down Youth and Family Services and I'll save money. Now, that's not always the case, okay? But it's certainly some of the case, okay? And
But in all fairness, you do actually, we have that discussion. We have that discussion at the board level.
yeah, we do have it.
I guess, you know, the monkey in the back here is, you know, Chief, you graced us tonight, but when we keep hitting these overages on the police budget, yeah, that's a different situation. It's not a maintenance issue. This isn't a,
So let me comment, if you don't mind. And I'm not, certainly not looking to get into a debate with you or, you know, have a lengthy discussion with this at 9 o'clock. But since becoming chief in 2009, I have made myself available to the Board of Finance on a very regular basis. And in fact, up until late, there were times where I was the only person in the audience at 90% of your meetings. I did that because I felt it was my responsibility as the department head that has the largest municipal budget based on our amount of personnel and the amount that we're open, to make myself accessible to everybody on this board whenever any type of question came about. Last year, we all probably had a difficult year that, quite frankly, I think we're all a little bit tired of revisiting and talking about. But I still made myself available to the board. And last year, at a meeting long before the end of the fiscal year, Mr. Thorpe actually calculated exactly how much we were going to be over.
It was June 2nd.
Pretty impressive. My memo, which you all got a copy of, to the first selectman, went to him the second we were going to go over budget. The police department did not spend extra money in expenses and supplies to buy things that we didn't need. We didn't go out willy-nilly and buy things. The bulk of our overage was in personnel for many reasons. Among them were sick time due to off-duty injury and the need to recruit personnel. The police department is a unique organization to run with a unique responsibility to the town. And while it might be good conversation around a table to say, hey, it might be cold in January, why do you have so many people on, or why are you staffing the shift this way? This board and other boards need to understand that part of my job as the leader of the police department is to ensure that we are keeping in concert with our collective bargaining agreement and that we're providing a level of service that we need to provide. There is not a time when we are having budget difficulties. We are requesting police officers to work extra shifts just so we can spend the money. Mr. O'Brien did an analysis a couple meetings ago, I think I just read the minutes the other day, where he looked at the history of all the overages for, was it the past 5 years?
6.
6 years. The police department was not over all of those 6 years. We do the best we can every year. I do not enjoy a budget overrun. I wish I can come in to the penny on our spending plan. But as we begin the budget process in December, for a budget year that begins the following July and runs the next 12 months, there are sometimes things that can't be anticipated, such as employee vacancies, employee illness, and injury. In the police department budget, more than 85% of the funds allocated to us deal with personnel because that's our largest cost. We're a service agency and we need people. So when I have a people issue, when I have a staffing issue, sometimes it costs us more money than what we have planned for. We don't like that. It happens. I'm transparent about it. I talk about it at the police commission. I have routine conversations with Carl. When Lisa was here, I would have routine conversations with Lisa. You see that twice a month when Bob provides his report. This has been very transparent. Nothing we like, but it is what happened.
Let me just say this. When people in town, there's a perception issue here. And when, like the other day, exit 67, no, it's not 67, 60, the one over here on Elm Street, you had some kind of a, I believe it was a seatbelt check, I'm not sure. It's that, it's like, why can't they not do that and stay in line with their budget instead of having 4 cars running with lights flashing and 4, I believe there's 4 or 6 officers there that are there. It's just that when you know you're gonna be running over, stop some of that stuff. Or when there's a...
So can I just speak to that point before you go on to the next point?
No.
Because it's important, because it is a perception issue. So when we're at a public meeting and something like that is said by someone with a lot of credibility in town, I feel it's important to kind of tell you what's going on there. So none of those officers were on overtime. All of those officers were on the shift. They were participating in the federal click it or ticket campaign that if the town does not participate in and does not submit survey information to the state and then to the federal government, there's a risk of losing money for DOT roadway improvements, and there's a lot tied to that event that costs the taxpayer no additional dollars. There was no one on overtime, the lights flashing don't cost money, and there were not 6 cops there. So it's important that when things like that are said, not to be argumentative in any way, shape, or form, but I feel it's important for the truth to be disclosed. And that's why when I come to these meetings, it's important for you to share that information, that perception issue, and allow me to explain, if I can, what it was someone saw or what it was that someone told you, And if not, research it, find out, and come back and explain it to you.
Yeah, well, this is what happens, is there's a perception issue. You know, they see all these road jobs and they see all these policemen, okay? And then they see these, you had a DWI the previous weekend, the trucks out there, the flashing lights, it's blinding. It's like, it's mega. And so the perception is, this guy's got a budget, he's run over 100,000 for the last 2 years plus. And yet he's got this mega perception. I don't see this happening in other towns. They had a roadblock in Essex. They had 2 state cops and 2 cars, and there wasn't the road show, you know, the circus going on. And so if you're within your budget, I don't think the people would care. But when you're over your budget and they see this going on, they say, why can't we cut it down?
So Brad, again, I appreciate your comments, not to be argumentative. He doesn't have anything. So Michael Spira does not use his personal checking account to run the police department, nor do the taxpayers give me their dollars to use at my discretion. There is a spending plan that goes through probably one of the most elaborate budget check and balance systems of many different towns. So if you think about our budget process, December 28th, I'm going to present a budget to our police commission. 90% of this board will most likely be in the audience, as you were last year and the year before. So you hear the budget presentation. The police commission will take the budget, do whatever they want to do with it, and adopt it. They will then send it by charter to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen have a workshop. 75% of the Board of Selectmen was probably at the original budget presentation, and have had many off-meeting discussions about the budget. Yet, we still go in and talk about the budget again. Then the Board of Selectmen will adopt a budget, and by charter, send it to the Board of Finance, where again, the very beginning part of the process is brought back in to give the same presentation and answer the same questions that have been answered at 2 other levels. I have no issue with that. I just think it's very transparent. I think there is an immense amount of opportunity for people to ask questions and get answers. I understand perception issues. In fact, current day, everyone in law enforcement clearly understands perception issues. But I can't deal in perception. I have to deal in fact. So when you call a grant-funded, off-budget funded operation a circus at an expense to the taxpayer, I have to take offense at that as the police chief, because I know it didn't cost the taxpayer any money, and I know it wasn't a circus. I know it was a professionally run operation, which the state's attorney's office requires us to run in a certain way and submit documentation on how it's run, so every DUI arrest has that operational plan attached to it. A requirement from a state agency, not from Michael Spira. So understand that the job of the police department is bigger than one person. The budget is bigger than one person. And if I could keep everyone staffed and healthy during a year, and they all agree to take vacation time when it doesn't impact the schedule, Brad, I would have done that years ago. But that's not reality, and I can only deal in reality. And I implore this board to partner with me to understand some of the facts and the restraints that I have to deal with as police chief every day to make the organization successful for the town.
Yeah, when I made that comment, I wasn't saying that comment. I'm saying to you, that's the perception that they're seeing.
So help me counteract that perception. When someone says that to you, now you're armed with information to be able to say, well, you know, we actually just discussed the off-budget accounts. I know that that was fun. You got a golf cart? You helped fund that. Did you plead guilty on your ticket? You helped fund that. Your mill rate had nothing to do with that safety operation that you saw. All of you now know that, and I've learned through some private conversation that some of the things I have failed to do is arm all of you as elected officials with that information, so then you can talk to your constituents when they have a perception-related comment and enlighten them with the truth. So I look forward with partnering with each and every one in this room and those not in this room to share that type of information so we can let the taxpayer and our citizens know the truth about what's going on rather than banking on what their perception is.
questions for Carl?
Carl,
It's still the selectmen's report.
He's done.
to go back
That was
to
good.
Youth and
He's done.
Family Services, do you want a motion to the effect of adding that 4796
Oh,
back
We
on?
first have to make a motion to add it to the agenda.
Yeah.
Add it to the agenda?
So,
Okay.
I think that was the intent of the 15-16 budget, was to have that money in there.
Right, no,
Yes, it was.
Yeah, so I think you should add it to the agenda,
Okay.
that, and then I think that matter should be brought before the board.
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
So.
What are we adding?
The motion is, I want to get these,
4,700.
96.
What was that money gonna be used for?
Oh, that was in the budget to start with. We didn't put it
It was
in
a
when
paper
the
error.
budget got passed. It wasn't in the actual budget.
Type of
4796.
error?
So it's a
Yeah.
motion to add to the Youth and Family Services budget an additional appropriation of $4,796.
Is it a motion to add it or a motion to discuss adding it?
It's a motion to add,
Add it
Discuss it.
second, and then
There's no
discuss it.
discussion.
yeah, to,
Motion to add the discussion
That's for the next meeting.
first.
No, it's for this meeting.
motion
No,
to
it's
add to
tonight.
the agenda a discussion
Yeah,
about an additional appropriation.
okay, and who made that, John?
John
Yeah, I
Bear.
seconded it.
Barry seconded it?
Yeah.
So there's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of adding this to the agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's been added to the agenda. We know what the issue is. Is there a motion to appropriate
Okay.
$4,796 to the Youth and Family Services
So
budget?
moved. Second.
Brad makes the motion and John seconded. Is there any discussion?
I think Tom needs a discussion on it, because he doesn't understand where it's coming from. And I
Yep.
think we
Yep.
discussed it before it was written, so.
Nope. You're right.
Was that a typographical error in the report, or how is it that we didn't get that money there?
How what? How come it didn't get added?
Yeah.
I think when we were putting together the budget, I think it was done at one of the last meetings, and it was on our end, it was a mistake.
So what's the money gonna be used
It
for?
would- Heather, do you want to speak to, I think it was for additional coverage?
Right, and I can answer it better for you tomorrow, I can research it if you like, because we had made a proposal last year, and then again, at last minute, something was added, and the numbers just weren't transferred properly to what was submitted to you.
I know there's been several
So
requests
it was
about the
some
information.
Yeah.
That's
About-
right.
There's been several requests previously in the last year or 2 years about additional coverage, so wasn't sure if this is one of those incidences where you
I'm not
need
sure if that's
additional
it, because
coverage.
actually
It was
they
for
declined
hours.
the
It was hours, extra hours.
additional coverage that we
Yeah.
asked for,
As I
so I'm not
recall.
sure
It's
what
definitely
this is
hours.
for. I can get that information for you in the next couple of days and get it back
It
to
was
you,
for
Perfect.
hours.
because I'd like to track it down accurately for you.
So now do you want to vote on it, Heather?
We can
We
vote
should
on it.
probably table it if we're gonna get additional information, or?
Well, Carl, did you talk initially tonight about, talking about it tonight and then voting it on the next thing?
Talk about last week.
I thought it was,
Last meeting.
Heather and I are gonna have to have a discussion. I thought it was for something very specific, but Heather is saying it may not be.
Wasn't, I have a note down saying that it was, someone went from 30 to 37.5 hours, and we needed to add, I think, that money for health benefits.
Thank you for those good notes that you took, Rick. That's exactly what it was for. It was the position of Chelsea Graham, 30 to 37.5, and we just didn't carry over
Okay.
enough.
So it was ours.
I think it was Brett's motion, actually, if I remember.
Could have been.
So
That's right, it was for the program
health
coordinator.
benefits for the additional hours.
For the program coordinator.
That's what was added. I
That's
think,
what
I think we all agreed upon it. It's just a matter of putting it back in, because they didn't put it in.
Okay.
I do remember that you did pay us adding that to the budget at the time. And the problem was that we then went on to decide what the total number was that was going to referendum, and we didn't add it
We
in.
didn't add it.
Yes.
That's correct.
So it's mechanical error.
Yes,
Yeah.
That's what happened.
that's exactly what happened.
You
But
happy
it was
with
already appropriated.
that? Are you happy with that? Answer.
It's additional money, I'm never happy with that.
Well, it wasn't additional. It was already
Basically
in.
affirming in this year's
We
budget
did
what you
that a
voted
long
on
time
last
ago.
year.
Right.
Right. So there is a motion and a second to add the 4796 to Youth and Family Services. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Thank you for staying.
I voted.
Public comment.
Thank you, Brett, for making my comments.
Here you go. No public comment. No further public comment.
I had some public comment.
Oh, you can go right ahead.
Under full disclosure, today I had a meeting with Chief Spira. And the bottom line was that we talked about transparency and accountability, and we discussed that many of our questions that we have for detail and documentation may be made through our Board of Finance liaisons to potentially the new liaisons that are going to be with the Police Commission. And then the Police Commission liaisons would convey that information to the chief, thus reducing the amount of time the chief may have to be here at some time in the future, allowing him to go back to the street. And, you know, not being facetious, but he does spend a lot of time at these meetings with us. And if we want accountability and transparency, and we have another political arm in the police commission, we can attempt that status initially. If we have to, we can go back to the chief directly. Is that basically what we discussed?
Correct, and that additional thing that we discussed, that if any board member feels that they've asked a question and have not received an answer, please let me know, because spoke for an hour and a half tonight. I'll be more than happy to provide you with an answer with backup data.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there's any department that you would like to see, department head, or anyone you'd like to see with regard to these off-budget accounts, let me know, and I will invite them in. There are an awful lot of off-budget accounts, certainly not just the police department. Let me know who you want to see, and we'll get the reports, and we will discuss it. I have no other comment. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye. For the PTA. Unfunded, you know, the.